Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. I am still working away repotting trees, and I picked out quite a selection of trees here to repot today. A lot of small little seedlings, some more mature trees. It's going to be a big job, and it's pretty ambitious to try and repot these all today, but that's my goal. So here I go. On the table here today, I have my London plane trees. They're just starting to leaf out, so I need to repot those. The pot is full of weeds. These were grown from seed by Michael in the KW Club, and I don't know if they've ever been repotted before, so today I'll be taking them out of this pot and creating a small forest with them. I think these are hornbeams, and these were given to me by Jason from the KW Club. So there's two of those. I have some apple trees, this one, and I have a pot full here. These are crab apples, and I just took the fruit right off the tree and stuck it in the pot, and some of them germinated, so that was kind of cool. I have some maples here. These are those fancy lace leaf maples. I have a native oak here that was given to me by Matt. I'm going to repot that. Back here I have an oak tree that was grown from an acorn. And this is, I'm not sure the species, maybe Bur Oak. The parent tree had one of the roughest barks I've ever seen on an oak tree, and it wasn't that old. And I always wanted to grow one, so I've been collecting acorns off it, and one of them germinated. So this is the only one that's germinated so far. So I'm going to repot that today. And I have a fig tree here. This is the edible fig, Ficus carica. And you can see there's a green bud on the top up here. And that needs repotting. It's been in this pot way too long, like years. So yeah, so that is everything I need to repot today. Quite an ambitious goal. So I'll get to it, and I'm going to start with the plane tree forest. There is a tag in the pot. It says Plane 2021 from seed. So, you know, they're 3 years old now. The plane tree is a really cool tree. They get this, the bark looks like camouflage. It flakes off in plates, and you get various colors from green to gray on it. It's a really cool tree. They are a fairly large leaf tree. So we'll see how they do as a bonsai. You don't see too many plane tree bonsai. I'll begin now, so I'll get the trees out of the pot. Just loosen up the soil in the pot, and then I'll pull them out like that. So there's a lot of weeds in this root system. And the weeds, you can see these white roots that are active, that's the weeds. The actual roots of the plane trees aren't active yet. So I'll begin combing out the soil. Looks like they're growing in nice bonsai soil, which is always a plus. The weeds in this pot, I think they're goldenrod, which is a native plant here. And the roots are really deep, so if you try and pull them out, it just usually breaks the root system off and they regrow. So not easy to weed this. So, you know, totally bare rooting these and replacing with new soil will help solve that weed problem. So I'm going to bare root all these trees and wash the roots before I start any root pruning and arrange them in a forest. So I'm going to not show the work of me combing out the roots. I'll just show you the roots, and then we'll start with the root pruning. Otherwise, because I have so many trees to do today, this video would be like 4 hours long or even longer. So I'll just be showing you the important steps today, not every detailed step. I have got all the trees bare rooted. So the next step is the selection process. So I need to grade the trees from smallest
to strongest. And this initial selection will pretty well stay true for these trees throughout their life. That the smaller, skinnier ones will always stay smaller and skinnier than the stronger ones. It's just the genetics of the seedling. So when you arrange them in a forest, your small trees will always stay the smallest, and your larger trees will always grow with more vigor. So it kind of develops the forest nicely because you keep your proportions of your larger trees always grow nice and strong, and the weaker ones stay smaller, so you get some nice variation in the forest. Now, have I got these graded correctly? I'm going by trunk diameter. Is basically my criteria. I think this one could be changed around a bit. I think that's pretty good. I'll show you a close-up of it. Here is a look at the trees. So I'm going from the thickest trunks all the way down to the skinniest ones. You can also see that the roots on the thicker ones, there's more of a root system, and as you go down, the root system gets less and less. So that is the trees graded in order of vigor. I mentioned that I'd be planting these trees in a forest, and there's several strategies you can use for creating a forest. You can grow all these trees in individual pots for many years, work on the root system and the branches and everything, and then when they're a little more mature, you can assemble the trees into the forest. Or you can root prune them today, assemble it into a forest, and probably every time you repot the forest, you should separate the trees and work on the root system. If you just plant it in a forest and leave it for many, many years, the roots won't be, nice and radial and balanced. They'll be kind of all over the place, different thicknesses, and your forest may not look quite as miniature. So I think the best strategy is to grow them as individual trees with, keeping in mind that you'll be assembling them into a forest someday. The only danger with that is that you don't get an idea of size and proportion of the trees. You can kind of guess, well, I need this tree about this height and this one I want to keep small, but until you assemble them into the forest, you don't really, it's harder to prune them. So I am going to assemble it into a forest, and I'll, work on the forest as a forest when I prune them. And then when I repot the forest, I'll separate the trees and work on the root systems and then reassemble it back into the forest. I think either way works, but I think when you have them assembled in a forest, you get a better idea of branch structure and that, because the trees are all positioned relative to each other. They're not in separate pots where you're guessing how, the branches fit together and the trunks and all this. So yeah, so today I'll be assembling this into a forest. So my first step is to pick out a pot. I have picked out a pot. It's not too big, not too small. It's certainly larger than the pot the trees came out of. It's just a plastic under tray that I drilled holes in. And I think this will work quite well to develop the trees, for the next couple of years. I think it'll give them a little more room. They won't be jammed into this small pot like they were, so they can kind of grow and develop. So next, it is time to prune the roots, and there is a wild variety of root systems on these. They've never been root pruned. These are grown from seed. So yeah, some have good root systems. Some is going to take some hard pruning, I think. So it's quite possible that not all of these trees will live. This first initial root pruning, I think, will be quite severe. So we'll see how they do, but there's never any guarantees that they'll all survive. Now, I could just plant them as they are and they would all survive, but I'm going to try and sort the roots out, at least get them underway to get that kind of flat radial root system. Alright, I'll begin with the largest tree here. So you can see the root system. It comes down, there's a good radial root there. There's one going straight down, there's a radial root here, and this one also kind of comes straight down. So I'm going to start by removing this root, and I'm not going to take it totally off. I'm just going to reduce it back like that. The same with this root here. I'm just going to take it back to here. It's basically cutting it off. And then this root, it's a nice root. It comes out, and I'm looking, it kind of goes down on an angle and it kind of goes horizontal here. So I'll take that part off. And then I can just clean up some of these roots that are not quite growing a good direction. And I think that's it. That's, you know, the start of a good root system. Okay, tree number 2 now. So again, here there's a kind of a radial root, and then it starts to go straight down. So I'll prune that vertical part off of it. Like that. I've got one on the bottom here that's going straight down. I'll take that back. These roots are good. Here's one that's sticking up. I'll take it back. This one's too long. This one's growing down too far. Just take part of it off. This one's growing down too far. Take the end off of it. Just take some root hairs off there. And just a little bit of pruning on these longer roots. And that tree's ready for planting. Okay, tree number 3. Wow, there's that weed root in there. Pull that out. Okay, so it comes down, it kind of twists around. So I'm going to take off this taproot right here. Like that. There's a root growing up here. I'm going to take that off. It just wasn't growing a good direction. Some more weed roots in there. I got to get those out. There's a root here, comes out and then it goes straight down. I'll prune the end off that. I've got one going down here. I better just prune that one off too. And then I'll do a little pruning on these long ones. And I think that's about it. That can be planted. Now the next tree, you can see it has quite the taproot on it. It goes down, down, down. So usually, you know, the first repotting I try and cut the taproot in about half. So I'm going to go a little more than half here, right to here. And you can see, you know, all these roots are the start of my radial root base. Prune that long one off. And that is ready for planting also. I could maybe take this high one off there. Like that. Yeah. So that one's ready for planting. And you can see how each one of these root systems is very different from each other. But, you know, that's what you get in nature. Variation. Okay, so this one, my taproot kind of goes on an angle, so I'm going to prune it off here. And then I've got a long one here I can prune back. And the rest, just a little bit of trimming on them. And that's ready for planting also. The next one, wow, so it kind of curls around. I'm going to take this root off here, which is kind of the top root. Take this one back to here. This one, I think that one can be removed totally. It's just not going a good direction. Bit of trimming here. And that's going to be about it for that root system. leaving a fair amount on. The next one, well, here we've got a pretty good radial root system on this one. So I'll just trim off these roots on the bottom here, kind of flattening the root base out a bit. So if I were to pick one tree to grow as a specimen tree, it would be this one because it has the nicest root base. If I was to plant this individually, it's got a lot of good stuff happening with the roots. I am going to do a little bit of corrective work here though. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's ready for planting. The next one, wow, big taproot here. So again, I need to prune it off, and I'm going to be quite daring and go right up to here. Take that one off, reduce that one back. And that's about it. That's root pruned. The next one, you can see these root systems are getting smaller and smaller as the trees get down in size. Well, I can't do a whole lot. I can prune some of these roots back. That's about it. And then the last tree, it has, some good roots here. I can prune this one back, a bit of tip pruning, and that's going to be it. I'll take this high one off here. Yeah, that's about it on that tree. So that has got all the trees root pruned. There's my pile of roots. So the next step is to get them planted. I'm ready to plant the trees. I put my drainage screens in the pot. I got a base layer of soil. And I watered that base layer of soil because it just keeps it intact while I'm positioning the trees. So I'm going to start positioning the trees, and I'm going to put the largest trees out front, the smaller trees behind to give a sense of perspective in the forest. And I'll try and pick, the front of each tree. It's not real critical at this stage, but so I'll put my tallest tree here. I'll give the roots room to grow in a radial pattern so they're not too close to the edge of the pot. So that's tree number 1 in place. Add a bit of soil around it. Now, positioning trees in a forest it's quite difficult. Some people put like muck around the root bases to kind of hold the tree in place as you're positioning them or arranging the forest. But this one, this is maybe not the final positioning of the trees. It's just a training pot to develop the root system. So there's the first tree planted. The next thickest tree is this one. I can put it right here. Looks good. And is that the front of the tree? I think I want the root base angle out, so I'm going to use that. So I'll fill that in with soil. And I'll probably tip some of these trees as I'm working away here, but alright, my next tree, I think I'm going to put it in back here. Sort of in between these two. I think that'll look good. So your planting wants to get denser towards the back too. So, you have a few trees out front, and as you go back in the forest, the density should increase, and that also helps with that forest perspective. So that's why I'm kind of sparse out front, and it'll get denser as I go towards the back. I'll put it in right here. So these are getting pretty close to each other, which should give a lot of depth to the forest. And I'm going to put my last tree I'm going to put it in the middle just for some variety. And there's a spot there that I think could use a tree. Just looked a little empty in that area. Okay, I'll step back and have a look at it now and just see if I like the arrangement or not. Here is a look at the forest now. So when I'm looking at it, I'm looking for naturalness. Does anything look too contrived, out of place? I'm not sure where the exact front of the forest is, but maybe rotating it a bit. Yeah, maybe to there. I think this one could be moved out just a bit. Give a little more room to look in behind. That one. Maybe this one could come out just a bit. Don't tip over on me. I think it's going to tip over. I don't have much soil in there yet. Okay, well, I think it's quite good. I think the forest looks natural. It's certainly good for this stage. When the trees are a little more mature and I repot it next, I'm sure I'll rearrange them once again as it goes into maybe a good pot next time. So I'm going to fill it in with soil now, work the soil into the roots, and give it a water. So these trees aren't wired in or anything, so I have to be very careful. I'll keep them either in the greenhouse here or the poly house to keep the wind away from them until the root system starts growing, and then they'll be quite stable in the pot by kind of probably early summer to midsummer. And you can always place some stones around the trees to hold them in place until that root system develops. But if you wire them in, because these trees are young, the roots will grow and you'll get wire marks in your roots. And it can be quite severe, the wire marks, so that's the reason I'm not wiring them in. Okay, so that is got my plane tree forest planted. They're kind of roughly arranged in a forest. So I'll give it a water. So here I go. I will place some stones on the surface of the soil. I'm just worried that I'll bump it or something. It's best to make sure by putting some stones around the trees. A little extra security. I think that's good. I would say that this forest planting today is an intermediate step between growing seedlings and creating a bonsai forest. So they're kind of arranged and root pruned. So once they recover from this, then the next step would be to step up your game, get a nicer pot, rearrange the trees, be a little more fussy, and kind of keep refining the forest over the years. Every time you repot it, there'll always be trees that you say, you know, oh, I could rotate this tree a bit, or I could move it over a bit, and slowly throughout the years your forest composition gets refined. And these trees change too, so you know what might look good one year, in 5 years from then, maybe things have gotten out of proportion and you've got to rearrange things once again. So forests are always evolving. So let's rotate this around now and have a final look at it. All right, I'll rotate the forest around now. So I don't know where the front is, somewhere here. Coming around to the right-hand side. The back. The left-hand side, and back to the front. The next tree I'll be repotting is this oak tree that was grown from an acorn. It's never been root pruned, so it'll probably have a big long taproot that I'll need to cut in half. So let's begin. So I'll begin by getting the tree out of the pot. I'll begin by trying to get the tree out of the pot. Come on. Yeah. It's loose, but I just need to get it out. There's roots that have grown through the drainage holes. I should have checked that first. That's what's holding it in. So I'll snip those roots away. Okay, that should help getting it out. There it goes. Like that. And I'll begin combing away the soil and liverwort and weeds and everything else that's in this pot. There's a few jade cuttings in here. I don't know how they survived the winter in the greenhouse, but they did. There is the original acorn that this tree grew from. Amazing, you can see. So, it's on its own now. It's left the parent acorn. And here is a walnut. I don't know if I planted that or if a squirrel planted it. I think it was a squirrel. I see the taproot. It's a big one. I was wondering, I thought, where's the taproot on here? And it has grown along the bottom of the pot here. It is a very thick root. Oaks always have deep taproots. They're always anchored firmly into the soil, which makes them, you know, hard to collect at first because, you know, they develop that taproot first and then they start developing the radial kind of feeder roots. So most young trees in nature have a huge taproot that goes down in the soil. And once you sever that, it usually kills the tree. So you have to have lots of fine feeder roots on your root base when you dig up an oak for the tree to survive. Usually if you just cut that big taproot, you know, there's not much else feeding the tree and it dies. So oaks are a little difficult to collect. Not impossible, but just difficult. Okay, so I can see none of the roots are active yet, which is good. I think that's a Portulacaria afra cutting there. Okay, so I'm going to wash up the root base and then we'll come back for the root pruning. Here is a look at the root system on the oak. So you can see there's many roots that are intertwined here. So I think this is, well, there's a lot of roots coming off of the root system here. Wow. So I don't want to kill this tree, but I do want to bonsai it. So I'm going to start pruning. I'm going to come in here and prune this root right there. I'm just going to shorten this one temporarily, get all these roots out of here so I can see what I'm doing. I will be pruning more of that root off later. These are all tangled up. Okay, so that gets a lot of the roots out of the way. So this side I can reduce these roots back. They're just fine kind of roots. But this is the major taproot, and I'm going to have to use my ratcheting pruners on this one to come in and cut it away somewhere. You can see it doesn't come out very radially. So I hope in the future the whole thing can be removed. But for now, I'm going to come in and prune it right here. Like that. And just a little more pruning here. And I think, look at that curly root there. Take that off. I think that's, going to be it for the root system on the oak. So I'm hoping all these roots develop more in the future. And then I can prune off all these big, ugly, thick roots that aren't going a good direction. So that's, with oaks, that's usually the first step, getting that taproot reduced back and starting to develop a whole bunch of kind of radial roots that you'll use in your eventual bonsai root base. Yeah. All right, I'll plant the tree up. Now, I've got to pick a pot. That pot it was in was just absolutely huge. A little too big. So I'll find a smaller pot. I have picked out a pot for the tree, so it's a plastic training pot. It's a lot smaller than the big one that it initially was planted in. So I've got a base layer of soil in here, so now I can plant the tree. Okay, I'm going to place the tree in the pot, and I will try and arrange the roots so they're kind of flowing in a radial direction. Try. Come on. Okay, and then I can fill it in with soil. And the height, maybe this pot is a little shallow. I'll just work the tree down a bit, and that will do. So I'll fill it in with soil now. And I think that is good. The tree is ready for watering. So this is the first steps of this tree from a seed to slowly and eventually and hopefully becoming a bonsai. And an oak with very, very rough bark. I'm looking forward to seeing that someday. Okay, that is good and watered. Again, I'll place some stones around the tree to hold it in place. Alright, I've got some stones here that I will place around the tree. I think like that. That holds the tree in there really nicely. Okay, so that is planted. Let's take a final look at it. There is a look at the tall and mighty oak. Yeah, so there's buds all over the trunk on it. If they turn into branches this year, there might be a height reduction coming to it. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as is. Let it grow. The next tree I'm going to repot is also an oak tree. This tree was given to me by Matt. I think it's a native oak tree, and I'm not sure exactly what kind it is. I'm going to do the repotting of the other trees in part 2 of this video. So it's time now for today's updates. For today's update, we're heading out to the orchard to see what's happening with those trees. Someone has made a log pathway through the swampy section here. It's not bad to walk on. Here we are out at the orchard. Let's go check on the fruit trees. I'll start with this one right here. This is a pear tree. Looks like the buds are swelling on it. Not much activity yet though. Here is the spiral orchard. So my wife came out here and she sprayed all the trees with a dilute mix of lime sulfur, a bit of soap, and a bit of vegetable oil. So that should protect the trees from any bugs and insects. There's a few that I still have to prune, but I'm going to wait until they flush out with growth. If I prune them now, I think they'll bleed too much. I did get all the larger trees pruned back. They were getting quite tall, some of them. So it's just the smaller ones that need pruning, and they can wait. There's no immediate hurry. So they're all protected. They've got their spiral plastic wraps. The trunks are painted white and they've had their lime sulfur on them. So just waiting for spring. I don't see a lot of activity yet, but I'm sure that'll be coming in the next month. Yeah, it's quite a beautiful sight out here. This area here was all supposed to be edible forest, but it's all going to be planted with something, I don't know. It'll be a high maintenance area, this. A lot of weeding, and whereas the edible forest was just kind of maintaining the pathways and planting lots of edible bushes and berries and nut trees. But yeah, that's not to be, I don't think. At least not at this present time. We did start to expand the forest out here into this area, so there is a few trees, nut trees planted in this area, but that's it, not very much. I will clean out the birdhouses while I'm here, the bluebird houses. You can see there's the remains of a nest in there. So I'll clear that out, get it ready for spring. All right, I've got those cleaned out. Hopefully we'll get some more bluebirds in them this year. The forest in here is absolutely amazing. I just love walking through here. Here's a spruce in the forest with a beautiful root base. Check that out. Wow. Yeah, that's what you're after on your bonsai, is a root base like that. Fantastic. Radial all the way around. A few roots there that could use a little correcting, but yeah, really big tree too. Here is our orchard tree nursery. This is where we start all our little trees. Here's the larch. The buds are swelling. They're starting to turn kind of a golden color. Yeah, there's a few trees here we'll be digging up and putting in the orchard, the spiral orchard. Those are plum trees, cherry plums. And these larch will eventually go in the First Nations garden. They could probably stay another year in the ground here and then get dug up and put into the First Nations garden. I think they're a little young still. I thought there'd be more people out here working on their garden plots, but I guess maybe I'm the only one who has spring fever. There's a look at the log pathway through the swampy area. So that is it for today's updates in the orchard here. Everything's looking good and ready for spring.
That is all for part 1 of this video. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.